Welcome to Tough Talk. I'm your host, Paul Taros, and today my guest really needs no introduction. I'm sure many of you have seen her quite often. Her name is Anqunette, I almost said Jamison.
You can say Jamison.
Sarfoh. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2013 and decided to try cannabis as a treatment a year later. After making changes in her diet and using cannabis for management of her MS symptoms, she went from taking 9 medications a day to no longer taking any. She is in the process of opening a dispensary in Corktown and in collaboration with a Colorado-based cannabis baker, developing a line of edibles to address the needs of those who prefer to ingest cannabis. Before retiring as a television news anchor due to multiple sclerosis, she spent 20 years working in Indiana, Las Vegas, Boston, and Detroit. Welcome, Anqunette.
Thank you for having me.
Or should I say Q?
Just Q. Q's easier. Save some time.
It is easier, yes. Well, thank you so much for appearing on the show today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Is there a difference between cannabis and marijuana?
No. Cannabis is the legal scientific term, and marijuana is actually a slang, a Mexican slang word, not even Spanish, but a Mexican slang word for cannabis. So when our country decided to make it illegal in 1937, they decided to use the name marijuana instead of using the name cannabis, because at that time most doctors carried cannabis in their bags. It was a well-used not antidote, but a well-used and well-known substance that doctors used regularly. So when they decided to make it illegal, they used the name marijuana to link it with Mexican immigrants.
Okay. How did you discover that cannabis helped control your multiple sclerosis?
Well, in the MS community, it's really not a secret. It's one of the most effective substances when it comes to treating spasticity, which is muscle spasms. But when I was first diagnosed, I went on the standard treatments, a disease-modifying treatment, which was an injectable every other day. And I had really bad side effects from that, mostly nausea, unrelenting vomiting. And after about a year of those side effects, I decided to, my husband said, smoke a joint. and I smoked a joint, and the nausea disappeared, the headaches were gone. And I actually even had a little bit of energy, which surprised me, because multiple sclerosis, one of the main side effects is, or symptoms, is incredible fatigue. And I found that cannabis actually gave me a little boost of energy, so I could do some housework after I came home from work, which was a nice surprise.
Okay. Now you changed your diet also. How did you come to decide to change your diet?
There is a doctor. There are lots of MS-specific diets. They've come and gone through the years. One of the newest, one of the most recent ones is called the Walls Protocol, and it was developed by a doctor named Terry Walls. I believe she's in Iowa. She's a physician. She also has multiple sclerosis, and her multiple sclerosis was so bad that she was in a zero-gravity wheelchair. She was immobile. She couldn't walk, and she slowly changed her diet, and she wrote down the changes that she was making in her diet. It's all about feeding your mitochondria, your brain food. And she was able to leave that wheelchair behind, walk, resume her practice of medicine. And now she has a cookbook out, or not a cookbook, but a nutrition book out, and there's a whole protocol that's based on the diet that she's found effective for her MS. So I follow that, which is basically, it's a paleo type diet. Lots of grass-fed. You have to eat meat. Yay! It's but grass-fed. So my husband and I, we bought a quarter cow this year, so from a farm in Monroe, so we know where our food comes from. I mix in a lot of fruits and vegetables now, and so far so good.
So really it sounds like you did a lot of research yourself, and really, don't you feel a little maybe betrayed by the medical community that they didn't come up with this treatment?
I do, and it's funny that you say betrayed. I have little chills because that's exactly how I felt. I felt lied to and betrayed. This is a plant. Cannabis is a plant, and it got to the point where I would go to my doctor and they would put you on your disease-modifying treatment to not even cure your MS, but to sort of keep it at bay, to slow its progression. But those medications come with an array of side effects. And so you put on a different medication to combat those side effects. And at one point I was up to 9 medications. And I finally said to my neurologist, after a year of being sick and throwing up constantly, I want to try cannabis. And he instantly said, okay, well, it's proven to help your spasticity, and so he had no problem with it. But no, as I started reading the clinical trials, and I found that to get all of the clinical trials on cannabis, you have to go to international trials, mostly out of Israel, because that information, for whatever reason, is not available in this country. So yes, I did a lot of research, and when you look at what's happening in Europe and in Israel, all of the research that they're doing with this plant, and for a myriad of reasons, our country is refusing to do it. And this is something where, I mean, my MS drug was $90,000 a year, and it's for life. Luckily, I had insurance at the time, but for me, it's unconscionable to charge $90,000 a year I was 43 at the time, so I have a life expectancy of maybe 80, maybe 85, so 40 years. At $90,000, starting on that year. So, and this is for a drug that has been on the market for 20 years. So when it came on the market, it was $6,000. And then 20 years later, it's $90,000. So yes, I definitely felt betrayed, because here is a plant that had the same efficacy, according to some studies out of Israel, as my $90,000 disease-modifying treatment. So I could take this injectable every other day at $90,000, or I can grow a plant in my basement or in my backyard or in my closet, because I live in Michigan, thank God, and get the same efficacy, which is a 30% reduction in MS relapses. So neither one is a cure, and I'm not saying that cannabis cures everything. I do believe cannabis cures a lot of things, but when it comes to MS, this is for symptom management and disease management in my case, and not a cure. And it is just as effective, according to some studies, as these man-made pharmaceuticals. And to me, that is the biggest betrayal of our country, because they're keeping this information from people.
On a prior show, I had a gentleman who suffered from epilepsy, and he swears by
CBDs.
That, by partaking in the marijuana, it's controlled his. He had not had a major seizure in over a year.
I hear stories like that all the time, and it's wonderful to hear, and I hope that young man is spreading that word and telling as many people as he can, because the more of us who come out and say, this is what I do, I'm a normal person, I'm not living in my mother's basement, and I'm not a productive member of society, but this is the treatment that I choose, and I should have a right to it. If I have a right to every opioid and every other man-made or not even or natural substance to help my illness or my condition, I should have access to this one as well, and I should have safe access to this one as well.
Yeah. So now you're studying nutrition.
I do, yes.
And how it can nourish and heal your bodies. How important is nutrition in relation to our health?
Food changes everything, as they say. I'm studying integrative nutrition, and I'm doing that mainly because when I retired and said that I'm a cannabis user, a lot of people came to me with their medical conditions. And I always ask people, well, how's your diet? Let's start with your diet, because no matter what condition you have, chances are diet can improve it. And so if we start with diet, we can mitigate or maybe alleviate a lot of symptoms. I don't think people realize just how poor their diets are. I thought that I was a healthy eater, but I wasn't. When you think of the lack of nutrients in our food, even when you try to buy the best, the freshest produce, organic, But so much of our food is devoid of nutrients because our soil is deficient of nutrients. And so there are so many things that people need to learn when it comes to nutrition. But basically, it's get back to basics. If you can garden, if you have a space to plant a garden, plant a garden. We are lucky to live in Michigan where we are surrounded by some of the best farmers in the world. And so go to a farmer's market if you can't grow a garden. Find a sustainable farm and buy your meat from there. Same thing with chickens, same thing with eggs, pasture-raised eggs. Sure, those are the ones that are maybe $9 a dozen at the grocery store, which is incredibly expensive, I understand that. But it's for your health. And also, if you can find, if you know someone, there are some people who have chickens, who have free-range chickens in Michigan. Those chickens lay, what, an egg a day? So a couple eggs a day? So find a friend with some chickens, or find a friend with some land, and know where your food is coming from. And also, and learn more. There are so many things on the internet right now. All you have to do is Google healthy eating and just start clicking on things. It's that simple.
Are you in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana?
Absolutely.
Okay. How is your dispensary in Corktown progressing?
Well, right now we are in the process of going through state licensing. And we're also, we have been approved through Detroit, so we're very pleased with that. So right now, we're like so many others, our application is pending with the state, and we are in a wait and see mode. We're hoping to start build out on our dispensary in Corktown in the next couple of months. Right now, Detroit has a backlog on building permits and building inspections, so I think we're working with that. But we're chugging along, exciting times. Hoping to be open, sometime in April. 420 is a major holiday, so that's always a goal. But we're hoping as soon as possible, as soon as we're licensed and ready to go. Yeah.
How has the city of Detroit been to work with?
I understand that the city of Detroit, it's a big municipality. But I would say overall, they've been open. I've made a lot of phone calls to the city, to the city of Detroit, and they have been incredibly helpful. So I would say in that regard, yes. If I pick up the phone and I call and I have a question, someone is definitely there to answer my question. I feel that when we look at what we're going through when it comes to our dispensary, we're a little concerned about the backlog in building inspections, but I've never run a city, so I'm sure that there are lots of reasons behind that. So I don't want to judge that instance of all of this. But I would say overall fine. It's great that Detroit is one of the few municipalities that actually has an ordinance. So at least it was a place where we could start. Mm-hmm. There are so many other communities that are still trying to figure out where they want to be in all of this, and that's understandable. So when it comes to Detroit being on the forefront of this, absolutely, and we're definitely grateful for that.
Okay. So what's the name of your dispensary?
Botanic, with a Q, BLTANIQ. Yes.
Okay. Is it going to be just a dispensary, or is it going to be a grow facility too?
We have a grow facility as well, but the grow facility is in Warren.
Oh.
Same as our processing facility is also in Warren. So the dispensary is in Detroit because at the time when we, Detroit did not have a grower processing ordinance when we went through the application process. So now they may have one, we're not sure. But in the interest of time, we knew that we wanted to have a dispensary in Detroit because they had an ordinance. And we're working with Warren because right now Warren has a caregiver ordinance and they're transitioning into the commercial aspect of it. They still don't have an ordinance yet, but we're hoping that they'll have one drafted relatively quickly.
Okay. And you've been developing baked goods. How's that coming along?
Great. It's fun. I never saw myself as a baker, but when I retired and I really needed to step away from TV, when you're home all day, the only thing on TV pretty much is news. So I needed to turn off the TV, but I needed to keep my mind active and keep my hands busy. So I started baking, and I didn't want to smoke cannabis all the time. And a lot of times for people with MS, it's better for us to use edibles because they last longer. They can last up to 8-10 hours. So when it comes to muscle spasticity, that's great because it's almost an extended release medication. So, so I'm working on integrating healthier food into cannabis, and that's been fun. I have my family has been very accommodating, letting me try things out on them. I made my mother very uncomfortable, so not my intention. But some people, as they get older, they have they're a little more sensitive to cannabis, and so I need to know these things before I embark into this business world, because I want to help people and I don't want to hurt people, and I want to make them aware of what could happen. So I'm lucky that my family's been willing to be guinea pigs for me as I say, hey, can you try this? And I have a lot of friends who have eaten quite a few not so great cookies and brownies, overcooked, undercooked, all kinds of things. But it's been about a year now. So our recipes are set, our items are pretty much ready to go. And I'm just excited we're working on packaging and making sure that everything looks the way we'd like for it to look.
And what brand name are those going to be sold under?
Still debating. Debating. We're going back and forth on two different things. So So
okay.
To be continued.
Okay. Would you be distributing them to other dispensaries?
Yes.
Or? Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Very good.
Why not? Spread the love.
Yeah.
Spread the love.
Okay. So why do you think that up until the early 1900s, as you said, cannabis was legal, and then all of a sudden it became illegal?
Why? Well, a couple of reasons. The end of Prohibition was one. So that led to the need for another revenue stream. And then at the time, there was an immigration issue going on in this country, immigration from Mexico. And so a man by the name of Henry Anslinger decided to start a campaign to make marijuana. Well, he called it marijuana, but at that time it was cannabis. And so he started a campaign to demonize it, and for a variety of reasons. But he pegged it to, he wanted to peg it with Mexicans and blacks. So you demonize it and you make it seem as if only Mexicans and blacks are the ones using this substance. And the medical community at that time was against this, and then even. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Dingle.
John Dingle?
Right, but his father. Right, from the 30s.
Okay.
Right, but his father was the one that there's testimony, and you can read the transcripts, when they were talking about this in Washington, and this had come up to make this illegal. He was one of the most vocal opponents, saying this is ridiculous. Doctors carry this. People have been using this without any ill effects for generations, actually for thousands of years. We all know that. So at that time, this was a collaboration of forces. You had the end of Prohibition, so our government needed another revenue source, another taxation source, or not revenue or taxation, but another source of income. And this was a way to marginalize certain aspects of the community. And this was a very powerful person, and at the time, he was very successful. In collaboration with, I can't remember the people who were behind the Reefer Madness films, but in collaboration with the media at that time. As a former member of the media, I have to say that as well. Absolutely, we have been a part of the misinformation of the American public for 70 years now.
Well, I've also heard people say that pharmaceutical companies couldn't make any money off of it either.
Sure, but at that time in 1937, you didn't have the pharmaceutical industry wasn't as big as it is today. But I feel that right now the pharmaceutical industry is a huge deterrent to legalization right now. They have various reasons. Of course, they're trying to protect their profits. And don't get me wrong, I feel that pharmaceuticals, when used appropriately, are amazing. And I have benefited from pharmaceuticals. I still carry Zofran in my car, which is an anti-nausea medication. So I'm not necessarily one of those wrap me in the cloth. I'm totally against all pharmaceuticals. I am not. I am for the overuse. I'm against the overuse of pharmaceuticals, and I think that that's where we are in this country right now, where there's a pill for every ill, and that shouldn't be the case.
Okay. Isn't marijuana much stronger than it was 30, 40 years ago?
It can be. Sure, it can be. You have a lot of people who are crossbreeding. They're breeding out the cannabidiol, which is the more neuroprotective, which is the more I don't want to say more therapeutic, but it's the component that doesn't have the psychoactive effect, and it's definitely the component that is anti-inflammatory and it helps people with seizures. So yes, you have strains of cannabis that are much stronger than they would have been 20, 30 years ago. All that being said, it still isn't fatal. There is no such thing as a fatal overdose of cannabis, no matter how strong it is. So I would say yes, even though it is stronger, for some people like me, that means I don't have to use as much of it, and I don't have to use it as frequently. That means that if I choose to vape, or if I choose to use an edible, I won't have to re-up or reuse as quickly. And so to me, that's a positive thing about it being a bit stronger.
Okay. What do you say to people who say it's a gateway drug to harder drugs?
Well, that's been disproven, but it doesn't stop people from saying that. It doesn't stop people from believing that. And I say alcohol has been proven to be the true gateway drug. People aren't going to believe that. And I'm at the point now where, and I don't want to say I don't want to entertain that way of thinking, but I feel that it's not necessarily productive, because some people will always believe this is a gateway drug, and some people will always believe that it's not. So for those who believe that it is, what can we do or say to listen to that way of thinking, to listen to that opinion, and what can we do to sort of acknowledge it? So I say this, when I look at people who say this is a gateway drug, and you look at who are the people who are most vulnerable to gateway drugs, these are our teens, our adolescents. So let's make sure that whether it's a gateway drug or not, access is severely restricted to people who are underage. And when I say underage, when it comes to cannabis, I believe it should be 25, because your brain is still developing until you're 25, especially if you're a man. It's just the truth. It's just genetics. You guys are big and strong and brawny. So your brain is developing in males until 25. If your brain is still developing, there have been studies that show that cannabis is not good for a developing brain. Also, the younger you are, the more cannabinoid receptors you have in your brain, which means that you have a higher tendency to become addicted. There's truth to that. So when people say it's a gateway drug, I don't believe that's a gateway, but there is an issue that needs to be addressed. So we need to make sure that students, that teenagers know this isn't something for you. Wait, let your brain develop. Focus on other things right now. I say to young people, send me your grandparents. Those are the people that I need to see. Give me someone with arthritis, glaucoma. Those are the people who should be using these medications. Give me someone with a sports injury, back pain. If you're a young person and you may want to partake in all of this, wait. But we know that kids are not going to wait. So if they're not going to wait, we need to make them aware of the dangers, make them aware of the risks. And even though I am for recreational use, I'm for recreational use because it's already happening, and I don't believe that people's lives should be destroyed or altered because they've been caught with cannabis. And that's happening way too much right now.
Okay. I guess this is a leading question.
I like leading questions.
Why do you think that the police, beer and liquor companies, pharmaceutical companies, and even street gangs like MS-13 are all opposed to legalizing marijuana?
All right, well, let's see. I'm going to go just off of my memory here. Oh, I can tell you right now, if you look at states that have legalization versus states that don't have legalization. States with legalization, they have seen a 30% reduction in Medicare spending, Medicare and Medicaid spending. So you have all these seniors and all these disabled people who are deciding to not use their pharmaceuticals and instead use this non-toxic plant, and they are experiencing a 30% reduction in pharmaceuticals. Okay, so that's one reason why the pharmaceutical industry is not a fan. Let's look at alcohol. Just a study that just came out a couple of days ago, alcohol sales tend to decline 15% in counties that have dispensaries or in counties that are legal for cannabis use. So Sam, who's the guy who runs Sam Adams Brewery? I can't remember his name. It's either way, you know his name. So he was speaking to a group of either investors or he was speaking publicly a couple of months ago. And this is a foregone conclusion in the alcohol and beer community, that once legalization takes hold, we will see our profits drop. They know this, and so that's the reason why they are against it. When you look at certain pharmaceutical makers in particular, for example, the makers of fentanyl, they have been, I don't want to say blamed, but they have been accused of being a part of the opioid crisis. And when it comes to what happened in Arizona, the makers of fentanyl put in $250,000 into the anti-legalization campaign during the last time Arizona tried to become legal. So you have these deep-pocketed pharmaceutical companies that definitely want to protect their interests and their profits, and they're fighting, understandably so, to keep marijuana and cannabis illegal. So you said, now let's go to the gangs.
Gangs.
The gangs. Well, we know that cannabis is a cash crop from the South, and it's fueling a horrific murder spree in Mexico right now. The crime is discouraging, doesn't even begin to describe it. But yeah, so they have found in places like California, Colorado, Arizona, that the legal cannabis industry has put a significant dent into the illegal marijuana industry, especially the marijuana coming from Mexico. I don't have numbers, I'm sorry, but I can get them to you later if you'd like. But there has been evidence showing that legalization has significantly impacted the illegal drug trade in Mexico, and especially illegal drugs coming into this country. I can't remember the other.
Well, I think I said the police, but I think that's.
I think some police are in favor of legalization, and some police are not. So you have organizations like LEAP. You have. I've spoken to police officers in several municipalities. And I'm happy to say that the former Detroit Police Chief, Ike McKinnon, is in favor of legalization and is on board to helping us get the word out. And he was gracious enough to speak at our hearing for our dispensary in Detroit. So people's minds are changing, but it's slow. And I would hope that there are police officers who would much rather go after sex traffickers instead of people who are using cannabis.
Okay. Well, it looks like you're doing very well and have your MS under control.
I have good days and bad, but thank you.
Well,
I'll take that.
Thank you for taking time to appear on the show.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.